The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the first time in 3,000 cycles. Representatives from 47 civilized worlds sat in their crystalline pods, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic frequencies that the universal translator struggled to keep pace with. Ambassador Zephyr of the ethereal collective floated in her gossamer chamber, her translucent form shimmering with anxiety. The delicate tendrils that served as her sensory organs quivered as she addressed the assembly. Honored colleagues, the situation has escalated beyond our worst projections. The Devourers have consumed the Kepler 442 system entirely. 17 billion souls, gone in a matter of days. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Devourers were a nightmare made manifest, a swarm intelligence that consumed entire star systems, converting matter into more of their kind. They had appeared from the void between galaxies 6 months ago, and nothing the civilized races had thrown at them had even slowed their advance. Representative Korth of the Silicon Gardens, his crystalline body resonating with deep, mournful tones, spoke next. Our combined fleets engaged them at the Vegan Nebula. We lost 90% of our ships. The enemy sustained no visible losses. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can deploy them. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of the life support systems, maintaining the various atmospheric requirements of the assembled species. Each race present represented millions of years of evolution, peaceful development, and philosophical advancement. They were gardeners, artists, philosophers, and scientists. They were not warriors, and it showed in their elegant, vulnerable forms. Council Chairman Meridian, an ancient being whose species had achieved pure energy form eons ago, manifested his consciousness as a gentle golden glow at the center of the chamber. His voice carried the weight of cosmic ages. My children, we face extinction. Our peaceful ways, our dedication to art, and knowledge, these very virtues that make us civilized, may be our doom. Perhaps it is time to consider what we have long forbidden. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Every being present knew what he meant. In the deepest archives of the Council, sealed away for good reason, lay the coordinates to worlds that the civilized galaxy had agreed to never contact. Worlds that had been marked as unsuitable for peaceful contact. Death worlds. Planets where evolution had taken a different, more violent path. Ambassador Zephyr's form flickered with distress. Chairman, surely you don't mean to suggest we contact the primitives? The risk assessment reports are clear. Species from high-gravity, resource-scarce worlds with active predatory ecosystems develop traits that are fundamentally incompatible with civilized society. Incompatible? Yes, Chairman Meridian agreed, his glow dimming with sorrow. But perhaps that incompatibility is precisely what we need. Tell me, honored Zephyr, what do your people know of warfare? The question struck her like a physical blow. We study it as a historical curiosity, something our ancestors abandoned when they achieved enlightenment. Why would any species choose conflict when cooperation yields superior results? Because sometimes, interjected a new voice, cooperation isn't an option. The speaker was Ambassador Thane of the Ursine Republic, one of the few representatives of a world that had experienced conflict in recent memory. His bear-like features, evolved from a colder, harsher world than most, made him an oddity among the ethereal and delicate forms of his colleagues. My people remember the clan wars from 50,000 years ago. Even we, crude as we may seem to you, eventually chose peace. But we remember the lessons. Representative Korth's crystalline form chimed with confusion. What lessons could possibly be worth remembering from such a dark time? That sometimes, Thane said grimly, the only way to protect what you love is to become something you hate. The Devourers don't negotiate. They don't seek understanding or compromise. They consume. To fight consumption, you need something equally relentless. Chairman Meridian's presence grew brighter. Ambassador Thane speaks wisdom. I have been reviewing the sealed files. There are 3 worlds that show particular promise. All are classified as Class X death worlds, with gravity at least twice standard, aggressive fauna, resource scarcity, and frequent natural disasters. The species that evolved on these worlds had to become predators to survive. The council chamber erupted in agitated communication. The very idea of contacting primitive warlike species went against everything they stood for. But as the debate raged, updated reports continued to pour in. Another system consumed. Another civilization extinguished. The devourers were accelerating, and conventional wisdom was failing spectacularly. Ambassador Zephyr eventually called for order, her form now a deep shade of blue indicating profound sadness. If we are truly considering this course of action, which world would you contact first? Chairman Meridian accessed the sealed archives, his consciousness interfacing with databases that hadn't been opened in millennia. The third planet from a yellow star in the Orion Arm. Local designation appears to be Earth. The species calls itself human. The preliminary surveys from their Stone Age showed remarkable adaptability and an unusual tendency toward both cooperation and aggression depending on circumstances. What makes them special? Asked Korth, his crystalline structure now a worried purple hue. They are apex predators who learn to hunt in packs, but their world forced them to compete with hundreds of other predatory species. They developed a tool used to compensate for physical limitations. Most remarkably, they seem to form emotional bonds with other species, even former prey animals. They demonstrate both the capacity for incredible violence and profound compassion, sometimes simultaneously. Thane leaned forward, his black eyes reflecting a grim understanding. You mean they weaponized empathy? In a manner of speaking, yes. They protect those they consider part of their pack with extraordinary ferocity. The psychological profiles suggest they view pack loyalty as more important than individual survival. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These humans might be willing to die for beings they had never met, simply because those beings were threatened. It was a concept so alien to most of the council that it took several moments to process. Ambassador Zephyr spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. Have they achieved spaceflight? Basic chemical rockets. They've sent primitive probes to nearby planets in their system. Their development has been slowed by constant warfare among their own kind, but this same warfare has driven rapid technological advancement. They've gone from horse-drawn transportation to orbital flight in less than a century. Warfare among themselves? Korth's chime was horrified. Even after achieving global communication, especially after achieving global communication, they seem to view conflict as a means of solving problems rather than as a failure of diplomacy. It's barbaric, but it's also produced a species that thinks tactically by instinct. Representative Quill of the avian reaches, her delicate feathered form trembling with distress, chirped a question. What if they refuse to help? What if they view us as threats to be eliminated rather than allies to be protected? Chairman Meridian's glow pulsed thoughtfully. According to the psychological profiles, they have a documented history of putting aside internal conflicts when faced with external threats. They also have a strong protective instinct toward what they perceive as non-threatening intelligent life. Many of their cultural stories revolve around protecting the innocent. And if they succeed against the devourers, asked Thane, what then? Do we trust a species of predators to simply return to their world peacefully? The question hung heavy in the air. It was the elephant in the room, the unspoken fear that drove the classification system that had kept worlds like Earth quarantined. What happened after the monsters were unleashed? Chairman Meridian dimmed slightly. We face extinction, honored colleagues. The devourers will reach the core worlds within 6 months. Every day we delay means another system consumed. If these humans can save even a portion of our civilization, perhaps that is worth the risk. Ambassador Zephyr's form shifted to a resigned silver. How do we contact them? Our standard first contact protocols assume a peaceful, space-capable species. We adapt, said Thane grimly. We make it clear that we need their help, that innocent lives are at stake, and that we're willing to share our technology in exchange for their assistance. You mean we arm them? Korth chimed in horror. We enable them, Meridian corrected. These humans are already dangerous. What they lack is reach. We give them the tools to project their capabilities across the stars. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone would have predicted 6 months ago. 25 votes in favor, 22 against. Fear of extinction narrowly defeated fear of the unknown. As the council dispersed, each representative returning to their homeworld with the grim news, preparation for first contact began. The message would be simple. Innocent beings were dying, and the civilized galaxy needed protectors. They were about to discover that Earth's response to such a request was unlike anything they could have imagined. The transmission array on Luna Base flickered to life 3 days later. Dr. Sarah Chun, the xenobiologist on duty, nearly fell from her chair as the universal translator activated for the first time in human history. The voice that emerged was melodic, almost musical, and filled with desperate hope. People of Earth, we are the representatives of the Galactic Council. We come to you in our darkest hour, seeking aid against an enemy that threatens all life in our galaxy. We know you're not yet space-capable by our standards, but we believe you possess qualities we desperately need. If you are willing to help us, we are prepared to share our technology and knowledge freely. The message continued for nearly an hour, detailing the threat, the failures of conventional forces, and the resources they could offer. When it finally ended, Dr. Chin sat in stunned silence for nearly 10 minutes before reaching for the emergency communication array that would alert every government and military organization on Earth. Within hours, every major news network on the planet was broadcasting the same impossible story. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and the galaxy was asking for their help. The response was typically human, immediate, chaotic, and completely unpredictable. The United Nations Emergency Assembly convened within 18 hours of the first alien transmission. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in New York, the chamber buzzing with translations in dozens of languages as delegates tried to process the impossible situation they faced. Secretary General Maria Santos stood at the podium, her usually composed demeanor showing cracks of strain. Behind her, holographic displays showed the translated star charts the aliens had provided, highlighting the advancing threat and the civilized worlds that had already fallen. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed assembly hall, "we are faced with a decision that will define humanity's future. These beings, these Galactic Council representatives, are offering us technology beyond our wildest dreams in exchange for military assistance against what they describe as an extinction-level threat to all intelligent life." The Chinese delegate, Ambassador Wu Lin, raised her hand. "Madam Secretary General, how do we know this isn't an elaborate deception? How do we verify that this threat is real and not simply a cover for invasion?" It was a fair question, one that had been debated in emergency sessions across every government for the past day. Dr. Chun, now serving as Earth's primary xenobiological advisor, stepped forward to answer. "Ambassador Wu, the evidence is compelling. The mathematical proofs they've provided for their technology claims check out. The star charts correlate with our astronomical observations. More importantly, they've already begun transmitting technical specifications for faster-than-light communication arrays. If this were a deception aimed at conquest, why give us the means to contact other star systems independently?" General Michael Rodriguez, representing the combined military chiefs of staff, stood next. "Dr. Chin raises a valid point, but we must also consider the military implications. These aliens have described humanity as possessing traits they lack. They want us to fight their war for them. The question is, what happens to Earth when this war is over?" Secretary General Santos nodded gravely. "General Rodriguez has identified our primary concern. However, we must also consider what happens to Earth if we refuse. According to their projections, these devourers will reach our spiral arm within 2 years. Isolation is not protection if the entire galaxy falls." The Russian delegate, Ambassador Volkov, leaned forward in his seat. "What exactly are they offering? Specifically?" Dr. Chun consulted her tablet, still somewhat overwhelmed by the breadth of the alien technological package. "Complete specifications for faster-than-light travel, fusion power generation, anti-gravity systems, energy weapons technology, advanced materials science, medical technologies that could eliminate most known diseases, and manufacturing processes that could end resource scarcity on Earth." The assembly fell silent. The implications were staggering. Humanity was being offered centuries of technological advancement in exchange for doing what many species already considered their greatest talent: warfare. Ambassador Adora Okafor of Nigeria spoke next, her voice thoughtful. Has anyone considered that perhaps this is exactly the kind of challenge humanity has been unconsciously preparing for? Every disaster movie, every science fiction story, every military training exercise has been practiced for protecting Earth from threats. Maybe we're not being asked to become monsters. Maybe we're being asked to be heroes. The sentiment resonated through the chamber. For all their political differences, the assembled delegates shared common cultural touchstones. Stories of ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges, of protective instincts overriding self-preservation, of standing up to bullies regardless of the cost. General Rodriguez stood again, his expression grim but determined. If we decide to accept this request, we need to be smart about it. We can't just charge him blindly. I recommend we establish several conditions, such as, asked Secretary General Santos. First, we get the technology transfers up front before we engage any enemy forces. Second, we maintain command autonomy over human forces. We'll coordinate with the Galactic fleet, but we don't take orders from beings who admit they don't understand warfare. Third, we establish secure communication with these other civilized worlds. If we're going to risk our people to protect them, we want to know exactly who we're protecting. Ambassador Wu nodded approvingly. Sensible precautions. I would add a fourth. We want detailed intelligence on enemy capabilities, tactics, and any weaknesses the Galactic forces have discovered. Dr. Chen looked up from her tablet, her expression troubled. There's something else we should consider. The psychological profiles they've shared about us are remarkably accurate. They understand human nature better than most humans do. They know we'll say yes. They know we can't ignore innocent beings in danger. Is that manipulation? Asked Ambassador Okafor. Maybe, Dr. Chen replied. But it's also truth. How many of you could sleep soundly knowing that entire civilizations are being exterminated while we debate politics? The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Humanity would answer the galactic distress call. The response transmission was crafted carefully over the following week, with input from linguists, diplomats, military strategists, and psychologists. When it was finally sent, it was distinctly human in its blunt efficiency. Galactic Council, this is Earth. We accept your request for assistance with the following conditions: immediate technology transfer, operational autonomy for human forces, direct communication with threatened civilizations, and complete intelligence sharing regarding enemy capabilities. We also want something you didn't offer. We want to meet your people face to face. If we're going to bleed for you, we want to know exactly who we're protecting. Transmit coordinates for a meeting. We'll be there. The response came back within hours, carried on the new FTL communication array that human engineers had constructed in record time. Chairman Meridian's translated voice carried surprise and what might have been relief. People of Earth, your conditions are acceptable. We are transmitting coordinates for the neutral station at Proxima Centauri. We will also provide specifications for a faster-than-light vessel capable of carrying a delegation of your representatives. Be warned, the journey will expose your people to technologies and perspectives that may be disturbing. Are you certain you wish to proceed? The human response was immediate. Send the blueprints. 3 weeks later, the ESV Endeavour, Earth's first faster-than-light vessel, departed from Luna Base carrying a delegation of 12 humans representing every major nation and military organization on the planet. The ship itself was a hybrid of human engineering and alien technology, ugly by galactic standards, but built with the redundant safety systems and robust construction that characterize human spacecraft design. Captain Elena Vasquez, formerly of the International Space Station, commanded the vessel with a mixed crew of astronauts, engineers, and military personnel. The journey to Proxima Centauri took 18 hours, during which the crew had their first real glimpse of what they were being asked to protect. The Proxima Station was a marvel of engineering, a crystalline structure 3 kilometers in diameter that existed partially in normal space and partially in higher dimensions. As the Endeavour approached, the crew got their first look at galactic civilization. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at elegant spires that seemed to grow from the station's surface like exotic flowers. The designs were beautiful, organic, shaped more like living things than machines. Everything about them suggested grace, harmony, and peaceful purpose. Jesus, whispered Lieutenant Commander Jackson, the ship's tactical officer. Look at those hulls. They're gorgeous, but I don't see a single weapon hardpoint. How do they defend themselves? They don't. replied Dr. Chun, who had joined the delegation as humanity's xenobiological expert. That's why they called us. The docking process was handled by the station's automated systems, which gently guided the Endeavor to a berth size for much larger vessels. As the human delegation disembarked, they found themselves in a reception bay that had been hastily modified to accommodate their atmospheric needs. Waiting for them was a reception committee that looked like it had stepped out of a fever dream. Ambassador Zephyr floated in a containment field, her gossamer form shimmering with nervous energy. Representative Korth stood motionless, his crystalline body resonating with harmonious tones. Ambassador Thane of the Ursine Republic was the most familiar, resembling a large, intelligent bear walking upright. But it was Chairman Meridian who commanded attention. The ancient being had manifested as a gentle golden radiance that seemed to emanate wisdom and sadness in equal measure. Captain Vasquez stepped forward, her military bearing evident despite the diplomatic context. Chairman Meridian, I'm Captain Elena Vasquez of Earth. This is our delegation. We're here to evaluate whether we can work together to address the threat you've described. Captain Vasquez, came the translated voice, warm with genuine gratitude. Your willingness to travel so far to meet us demonstrates exactly why we believe humanity can succeed where we have failed. Please, allow us to show you what we're fighting for. What followed was a tour through the station that fundamentally changed how the humans viewed their galactic neighbors. They visited the archives, where the accumulated knowledge of 47 civilizations was stored in crystalline matrices that sang with preserved wisdom. They saw the gardens, where species from hundreds of worlds grew in carefully maintained harmony, creating art that existed as living ecosystems. They met children from a dozen races, all of them delicate, beautiful, and innocent in a way that struck the humans like a physical blow. These weren't warriors or conquerors. These were gardeners, artists, philosophers, and dreamers who had spent millennia creating beauty and seeking understanding. In a medical bay, they encountered refugees from the systems that had already fallen to the devourers. The survivors told their stories through translators, their various forms of communication conveying horror that transcended language barriers. They came from nowhere, translated one survivor, a creature that looked like a living tree with silver leaves. Our orbital defenses didn't even slow them down. They consumed our homeworld in less than 3 days. 17 billion of my people turned into raw materials for more devourers. The lucky ones died quickly. Lieutenant Commander Jackson found himself standing beside a small creature that resembled a cross between a dolphin and a butterfly. Its translator spoke in a child's voice. My parents stayed behind to help evacuate our city. I haven't heard from them since the feeding began. The tactical officer, a veteran of 3 wars and countless peacekeeping operations, had to step away for a moment to compose himself. By the time the tour concluded, every human in the delegation had the same grim expression. These weren't abstract aliens seeking military assistance. These were innocent beings facing extinction, and they had nowhere else to turn. The formal briefing took place in the station's central conference chamber, where holographic displays showed the Devourers' advance in real time. The enemy appeared as dark clouds spreading across the star maps, consuming everything in their path. Chairman Meridian presented the tactical situation with the detached precision of someone who had accepted the inevitability of defeat. The Devourers appear to be a hive mind of some sort, possibly artificial in origin. They arrive through what we believe are artificially generated wormholes, deploy in swarms of billions of units, and begin immediate conversion of all matter in a system. They adapt to our weapons within hours, sometimes minutes. What about nuclear weapons? Asked General Chun, the delegation's senior military advisor. Ineffective beyond the first use. They analyzed the fission process and developed countermeasures. Our fusion weapons lasted 3 engagements before becoming useless. Kinetic weapons? Directed energy? Same result. They learned from every attack. Captain Vasquez studied the tactical displays with a professional eye. What about their logistics? How do they maintain their numbers across such vast distances? Ambassador Zephyr's form flickered with surprise. Logistics, supply lines, communication networks, resource management. You can't field forces this large without massive support infrastructure. Where are they getting their energy? How are they coordinating across light years of space? The silence that followed was telling. These concepts were so foreign to the galactic races that they hadn't even considered them. Dr. Chun leaned forward. You've been fighting them like a natural disaster instead of an intelligent enemy. You've been trying to survive their attacks instead of disrupting their operations. But they're too powerful, protested Representative Korth. We can't match their numbers or their adaptability. You don't have to, said Lieutenant Commander Jackson grimly. You just have to make them bleed faster than they can replace their losses. Every military force has weaknesses. You just have to be willing to exploit them. The galactic representatives looked at each other with expressions of confusion and dawning hope. These humans were thinking about the problem in ways that had never occurred to them. General Chun stood and addressed Chairman Meridian directly. We'll need complete access to all intelligence on Devourer technology, movements, and capabilities. We'll also need specifications for your most advanced ships, weapons, and defensive systems. And we'll need them yesterday. If this enemy is as adaptable as you describe, our only advantage is surprise, and that won't last long. You mean you'll help us? Ambassador Zephyr's form brightened with hope. Lady, when kids are being hurt and innocent people are dying, humans don't negotiate terms, replied Captain Vasquez. We just ask where you want the bodies stacked. The expression was clearly idiomatic, as the translators struggled with it for several seconds. When they finally conveyed the meaning, the galactic representatives realized they had just witnessed something remarkable, a species that had weaponized compassion and turned protective instincts into a military doctrine. The war for galactic civilization was about to begin, and for the first time in months, the civilized worlds had reason for hope. The humans were coming, and they were bringing concepts that the galaxy had never imagined. Total war, unconditional surrender, and the idea that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to become the monster that monsters feared. The shipyards of Luna had been transformed beyond recognition in just 6 weeks. What had once been a modest collection of research stations and mining facilities now sprawled across the lunar surface like a metallic city, growing larger by the hour as automated construction systems worked around the clock. Admiral Sarah Park stood in the observation deck of the Terran Command, Earth's new flagship and first true warship designed from the ground up with galactic technology. Through the reinforced viewports, she watched as the 13th vessel in humanity's rapidly growing fleet took shape in the zero-gravity construction bay. Admiral, called Captain Torres from the bridge communication station, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Chairman Meridian is requesting an update on fleet readiness. Park suppressed a grimace. The galactic representatives meant well, but their constant requests for status updates revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of how human military operations worked. They seemed to expect that humanity would simply scale up existing galactic tactics rather than developing entirely new approaches to the Devourer threat. Put him through to my ready room, Park ordered, already dreading another conversation about humanity's unconventional ship designs. 5 minutes later, Chairman Meridian's golden radiance filled the holographic projector in Park's private quarters. His translated voice carried the same note of polite confusion that had characterized their previous discussions. Admiral Park, our long-range sensors indicate that your fleet continues to deviate significantly from standard galactic ship configurations. Our tactical advisors are concerned that these design choices may prove ineffective against Devourer swarm tactics. Park settled into her chair, choosing her words carefully. The galactic races meant well, but they approached warfare like a chess match between gentlemen rather than a fight for survival. Chairman, I appreciate the Council's concern, but human military doctrine is based on different principles than galactic naval combat. We design our ships to fulfill specific tactical roles rather than serving as general-purpose platforms. Could you elaborate? Our simulations suggest that your heavily armored vessels will be too slow to engage Devourer swarms effectively. Park activated her own holographic display, showing cutaway views of a human fleet's primary vessel classes. Sir, we're not designing ships to outrun Devourers. We're designing them to kill Devourers and survive the experience. Our tactical philosophy is based on the assumption that the enemy will adapt to our weapons quickly, so we need platforms capable of switching tactics without returning to dock. The first ship design she highlighted was the Aegis-class destroyer, a bristling combination of armor and weapons that looked like a medieval fortress crossed with a porcupine. These destroyers are built around a modular weapon system that can be reconfigured during combat. When the Devourers adapt to our plasma cannons, we can switch to kinetic penetrators within minutes. When they adapt to those, we switch to fusion missiles. Chairman Meridian's glow dimmed slightly with confusion. But such heavy armor will reduce maneuverability significantly. How do you intend to avoid enemy fire? We don't, Park replied bluntly. We intend to absorb it while delivering maximum damage to enemy formations. Human naval doctrine is based on the concept of the line of battle, ships that can take punishment while dishing it out. The second design was even more alien to Galactic sensibilities. The Hammer-class assault ship, a massive vessel designed to carry thousands of troops and their equipment directly into combat zones. This class is designed for boarding operations, Park explained. When we identify key Devourer command nodes or logistics hubs, these ships will deliver assault teams directly to the enemy. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Chairman Meridian spoke, his voice carrying what the translator interpreted as shock. Admiral, are you suggesting that human soldiers will attempt to board Devourer vessels? Our intelligence indicates that their ships are composed of the same adaptive matter as their ground forces. How would your troops survive such an environment? They probably won't. Park admitted with the calm acceptance that made human military commanders so unsettling to Galactic observers. But every minute they spend fighting inside a Devourer ship is a minute that ship can't consume planets. Sometimes the mission matters more than the troops completing it. It was a concept so alien to Galactic thinking that the translator struggled to convey it properly. The civilized races had long ago moved beyond the idea of acceptable losses, viewing every individual life as irreplaceably precious. The notion that soldiers might voluntarily enter situations with minimal survival probability was difficult to process. Park highlighted the final design, the Nova-class strategic weapon platform. Unlike the other ships, this one was built around a single, massive weapon system that took up most of the vessel's internal volume. These platforms carry what we call planet crackers, weapons designed to destroy entire worlds if necessary. If we can't stop the Devourers from consuming a system, we can ensure they don't get to keep what they've taken. The golden radiance flickered with what might have been horror. Admiral, surely you don't mean to destroy inhabited planets? Only as a last resort, and only after civilian evacuation, Park clarified. But, Chairman, we need to accept that some battles can't be won through conventional means. If a world is already lost to the Devourers, denying them its resources might be the most effective way to slow their advance. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the bridge communications. Captain Torres's voice carried barely controlled excitement. Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal from the Kepler 62 system. Long-range sensors show Devourer forces engaging the outer colonies. Park was already moving before Torres finished speaking. Signal General Quarters. All available ships to form up for immediate departure. And give me a direct line to the Galactic Council. They wanted to see how human tactics work in practice. They're about to get their chance. Admiral, Chairman Meridian's voice carried new urgency. The Kepler 62 system is heavily populated. Over 8 billion beings across 5 worlds. Our projections suggest that conventional evacuation would require 3 weeks minimum. Then, it's good that we're not planning a conventional evacuation, Park replied grimly. Captain Torres, signal the fleet. We're implementing Contingency 7. I am. All ships acknowledge Contingency 7. 30 minutes later, the human fleet departed Luna space in formation that would have been immediately recognizable to any student of Terran naval history. The 12 ships arranged themselves in a battle line, with the heavily armored destroyers in the center, assault ships on the flanks, and the strategic weapons platforms trailing at maximum communication range. The journey to Kepler 62 took 18 hours through hyperspace, during which Admiral Park briefed her ship commanders on their tactical approach. The plan was characteristically human, aggressive, risky, and based on the assumption that the enemy's greatest strength could be turned into a weakness. The Devourers adapt quickly to our weapons, Park explained to her assembled captains via holographic conference. But They adapt by analyzing successful attacks against them. What they can't adapt to is attacks that don't give them time to analyze. Captain Williams of the assault ship Retribution leaned forward in his projection. You're talking about simultaneous strikes across multiple vectors. Hit them faster than they can process the incoming data. Exactly. We're going to hit them with every weapon system we have, all at once, while our assault teams board their command vessels. Even if they adapt to 90% of our attacks, the remaining 10% should be enough to cause significant damage. Captain Shun of the destroyer Implacable raised a tactical concern. Admiral, our intelligence suggests that Devourer ships can separate into smaller units when damaged. Boarding teams might find themselves trapped on vessels that suddenly become much smaller and more maneuverable. That's why each assault team carries tactical nuclear devices, Park replied matter-of-factly. If they can't complete their mission and extract, they can ensure the target is destroyed. The casual mention of soldiers carrying nuclear weapons into combat was another concept that the Galactic observers found deeply disturbing. The idea that individual troops would be trusted with weapons of mass destruction spoke to a level of discipline and commitment that the civilized races found difficult to comprehend. As the fleet approached the Kepler-62 system, long-range sensors began painting a picture of the battle already underway. Devourer swarms had overwhelmed the outer colonies and were advancing toward the heavily populated inner worlds. Galactic Council defense forces were conducting a fighting withdrawal, their elegant ships darting in and out of engagement range while desperately trying to buy time for civilian evacuation. Admiral, reported Commander Singh from the tactical station, I count approximately 12,000 Devourer units spread across the system. They appear to be operating in coordinated swarms, with larger command vessels directing smaller attack units. Park studied the tactical display with professional interest. The Devourer formation was highly efficient, optimized for rapid consumption of planetary resources. It was also, by human standards, completely predictable. Signal the Galactic Council forces, she ordered. Tell them to cease their harassment attacks and withdraw to safe distance. We're about to demonstrate human tactical doctrine. The response came back within minutes, transmitted by Admiral Zenth of the Crystalline Fleet. Human vessels, we appreciate your arrival, but 12 ships cannot possibly engage an enemy force of this magnitude. We recommend immediate withdrawal and regrouping at the fallback positions. Park's smile was cold and professional. Admiral Zenth, please observe and learn. All ships, execute attack pattern Alpha. Target the largest command vessel in the primary swarm. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The human fleet didn't spread out to engage multiple targets, as Galactic doctrine would have suggested. Instead, they concentrated their entire force on a single point in the enemy formation. 12 ships unleashed the combined firepower of humanity's most advanced weapon systems simultaneously. Plasma cannons, kinetic accelerators, fusion missiles, antimatter torpedoes, and exotic energy weapons that had been theoretical concepts just months before all struck the target within a 3-second window. The targeted Devourer command vessel, a massive construct 3 kilometers long, simply ceased to exist. The explosion was visible across the star system, a brief new star that outshone the local sun for nearly 10 seconds. But the attack was just the beginning. As the Devourer swarms reacted to the destruction of their command vessel, the human assault ships launched their boarding parties. Hundreds of armored soldiers, equipped with weapons specifically designed for close-quarters combat, slammed into enemy vessels at velocities that would have been instantly fatal to most galactic species. The fighting that followed was brief, brutal, and devastating. Human soldiers didn't attempt to capture enemy technology or take prisoners. They simply destroyed everything they could reach before either extracting or detonating their tactical nuclear devices. Within 4 hours, the Devourer force in the Kepler-62 system had been reduced to scattered fragments. The survivors, adapting frantically to human tactics, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to give them time to complete their adaptation cycle. Admiral Zenth's transmission, when it came, carried a note of shock that the universal translator struggled to convey. Human ships, we have never seen anything like this. How is it possible? Our simulations indicated that conventional weapons would be ineffective against Devourer swarms. Admiral, Park replied. You were thinking conventionally. Human military doctrine is based on unconventional thinking. We don't fight fair, we don't give quarter, and we don't stop until the enemy is completely destroyed. The rescue and evacuation of the Kepler 62 colonies proceeded smoothly once the Devourer threat was eliminated. As refugee ships departed for safer systems, Admiral Park received a priority transmission from Chairman Meridian. Admiral Park, the Council is prepared to authorize immediate expansion of human fleet construction. We would like to discuss deploying human task forces to other threatened systems. Park nodded grimly. Chairman, with respect, we're past the point of defensive operations. It's time to take the war to the enemy. We need to identify their staging areas, their resource bases, and their command structure. And then we need to destroy all of it. You mean to attack them in their own territory? Sir, the best defense is a good offense. We're going to hunt these things down and kill them wherever we find them. That's what humans do when someone threatens our friends. The concept of friendship between species and the military obligations it entailed was another uniquely human trait that the galactic races were struggling to understand. But as reports of the Kepler 62 victories spread across the civilized worlds, they began to grasp that humanity brought something to the war that they had never possessed: the absolute determination to protect others, regardless of the cost. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans adopted someone into their pack, they would move stars to keep them safe. And the Devourers, for all their adaptability, had no defense against an enemy that fought with the fury of the righteous and the tactical precision of apex predators. The war was entering a new phase, and humanity was just getting started. The war room aboard the Terran Command had become the unofficial strategic center for the galactic resistance. Representatives from dozens of civilized worlds gathered around the massive holographic display that showed the current state of the conflict, their various forms of communication creating a constant background hum of coordination and planning. Admiral Park stood at the center of it all, her weathered face reflecting months of continuous combat operations. The human fleet had grown from 12 ships to nearly 300, with new vessels rolling off the production lines daily. More importantly, human tactical doctrine was being adapted and implemented by allied forces across the galaxy. Status report, she called out, her voice carrying over the diplomatic chatter. Commander Singh, now promoted to Fleet Intelligence Officer, stepped forward with his daily briefing. Ma'am, Operation Thunderstrike was a complete success. The Devourer staging area in the Andromeda Reach has been eliminated. Captain Martinez reports total destruction of 17 command vessels and approximately 40,000 support units. A collective murmur of approval rose from the assembled alien representatives. 6 months ago, the idea of actively hunting Devourers in their own territory had been inconceivable. Now it was routine. Casualties? Park asked. Light. 3 wounded, no fatalities. The new boarding tactics continue to prove effective. Admiral Zenth of the Crystalline Fleet, now serving as the primary galactic liaison, chimed his approval. His crystalline form had adapted a distinctly more aggressive resonance pattern since working with human forces. Admiral Park, these results continue to exceed all projections. However, our intelligence services have identified a concerning development. Park's attention sharpened. Go ahead, Admiral. Long-range reconnaissance has detected Devourer forces massing in the Void Nexus, approximately 300 light-years beyond the galactic rim. The concentration appears to be orders of magnitude larger than anything we've previously encountered. The holographic display shifted to show the newly discovered threat. What appeared on screen defied comprehension. A swarm of Devourer vessels stretching across several star systems, their dark forms blotting out entire star fields. Ambassador Zephyr's gossamer form flickered with distress. Preliminary estimates suggest over 10 million individual units. If they advance on the core worlds simultaneously, even our enhanced defenses may be insufficient. Park studied the display with professional detachment, her mind already working through tactical possibilities. Intelligence assessment, Commander Singh. What are they doing out there? Unknown, Admiral. The formations don't match any known Devourer behavior patterns. They appear to be waiting for something, or building something, added Dr. Chun, who had become humanity's primary expert on devourer technology through the unpleasant process of dissecting captured specimens. I've been analyzing the debris from our recent engagements. Their technology is evolving faster than we initially believed possible. She activated a secondary display showing microscopic images of devourer matter. This isn't just adaptation to our weapons, Admiral. They're incorporating our technology into their own systems. The latest specimens show clear evidence of human engineering principles integrated into their basic structure. The implications hit Park like a physical blow. They're learning from us. Not just learning, Dr. Chun corrected grimly. They're improving on our designs. The latest Devourer units show armor configurations that are actually superior to our current specifications. Ambassador Thane of the Ursine Republic, his bear-like features grim with understanding, spoke for the first time in a briefing. Admiral, in my people's ancient wars, we had a saying, beware the enemy who learns from defeat. If these devourers are incorporating human tactics and technology, they may be preparing for a final assault that combines their adaptive capabilities with our strategic thinking. The war room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Humanity's greatest advantage had been their unpredictability, their ability to think in ways the devourers couldn't anticipate. If that advantage was gone, recommendations? Park asked. Commander Singh stepped forward again. Admiral, I believe we need to accelerate our timetable. If the enemy is adapting our strategies, our only option is to hit them before they complete whatever they're building in the Void Nexus. With what force? Even our expanded fleet doesn't have the numbers to engage 10 million enemy units simultaneously. It was Captain Martinez who spoke up from his position at the tactical station. He had just returned from the successful Thunderstrike operation, his uniform still bearing the distinctive marks of combat boarding actions. Admiral, what if we're thinking about this wrong? We've been focusing on ship-to-ship combat, but the Devourer's greatest weakness has always been their centralized command structure. What if instead of trying to destroy 10 million ships, we focus on killing whatever is giving them orders? Park turned to study the tactical display again, her mind racing through possibilities. Elaborate, Captain. Every engagement we've had with Devourer forces has shown the same pattern. Destroy the command vessels, and the smaller units become confused and ineffective. If this massive concentration in the Void Nexus is being coordinated by some kind of central intelligence, taking out that intelligence might collapse the entire swarm. Dr. Chin nodded slowly. Captain Martinez may be onto something. My analysis suggests that the Devourers operate as a distributed intelligence, but with definite hierarchical command structures. There has to be some kind of primary control node directing operations on this scale. A headquarters, Park mused. Every military force needs command and control. Admiral Xantha's crystalline form resonated with concern. Admiral, even if such a target exists, how would you propose reaching it? Our long-range sensors indicate that the Void Nexus concentration extends across multiple star systems. The command structure could be anywhere within that volume. Park was quiet for several minutes, studying the display and running calculations in her head. Finally, she turned to address the assembled representatives. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, I'm going to propose something that will sound insane by galactic standards, but makes perfect sense from a human military perspective. She activated a new display showing the human fleet's current disposition. We're going to conduct a deep penetration raid into the heart of enemy territory. One task force, minimal support, maximum speed. We'll punch through their outer defenses, locate their command structure, and destroy it before they can react. The reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly negative. Ambassador Zephyr's form flickered so rapidly it was almost strobing, while Admiral Xantha's harmonics became discordant with alarm. Admiral, Xanth chimed urgently. Such an operation would be suicide. Even if you successfully penetrated their defenses, you would be surrounded by millions of enemy units with no possibility of extraction. That's correct, Park acknowledged calmly. This would be a one-way mission. The silence that followed was profound. The Galactic representatives struggled to process the idea that an entire fleet would voluntarily enter a situation with no possibility of survival. Ambassador Thane broke the silence, his voice heavy with grim respect. Admiral, you're talking about a death ride. My people have legends of such things, warriors who chose certain death to protect those they loved. The Battle of Thermopylae, Captain Martinez added quietly. The Charge of the Light Brigade. Cameron. Humanity has a long tradition of impossible missions undertaken for necessary goals. Dr. Chun stepped forward, her scientific mind already working on the practical aspects. Admiral, if we're serious about this, we need to maximize the chances of success. I recommend we modify our assault ships with the heaviest nuclear warheads we can fit. If we can't extract the boarding teams, we can ensure they take the target with them. Park nodded approvingly. Commander Singh, I want you to run projections on enemy response times. How long would we have from initial penetration to their full response? Based on observed devour reaction patterns, approximately 12 to 18 hours before they could coordinate a system-wide response. The sheer size of their force may actually work against them in terms of communication and coordination. 12 hours, Park mused. Enough time to identify primary targets and deploy assault teams. Captain Martinez, how many volunteers do you think we could get for this operation? The captain's smile was grim but determined. Admiral, you're talking to a crew that signed up to fight monsters that eat planets. I suspect the question isn't how many volunteers we'll get, but how to choose from all the volunteers we'll have. It was a distinctly human response, and one that left the Galactic representatives struggling to understand. The civilized races valued individual life above almost all other considerations. The idea that soldiers would volunteer for certain death was beyond their comprehension. Admiral, Ambassador Zephyr managed to say, surely there must be another option, some way to accomplish your goals without sacrificing an entire fleet. Park turned to face the ethereal being, her expression gentle but implacable. Ambassador, your people called us because you needed something you didn't have. This is what that looks like. Sometimes protecting the innocent requires good people to make terrible choices. But the cost is acceptable, Park interrupted, because the alternative is the extinction of everything we're trying to protect. One fleet sacrificed to save a galaxy. From a human perspective, that's not just acceptable, it's a bargain. Over the following week, preparations for what became known as Operation Last Stand proceeded with grim efficiency. The volunteer list had to be limited to 300 ships because so many personnel wanted to participate. The selection criteria were brutal. Only the most experienced crews, the most skilled assault teams, and the deadliest ship configurations made the final cut. The modified warships were fitted with experimental weapons systems, enhanced boarding capabilities, and enough nuclear firepower to sterilize planets. Each vessel carried a crew that understood they were saying goodbye to everything they had ever known. On the day of departure, Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Terran Command, looking out at the assembled fleet. These 300 ships represented humanity's finest: soldiers, sailors, marines, and support personnel who had volunteered to die for people they had never met. Admiral, Captain Torres reported from the communication station. All ships report ready for departure. The Galactic Council sends their respects and gratitude. Park nodded grimly. Signal the fleet. Operation Last Stand is authorized. All ships form up for jump to target coordinates. As the human task force activated their hyperspace drives and vanished into the void between galaxies, those left behind could only wait and hope. The civilized races had asked humanity for protection, and now they were about to learn the true price of that protection. In the void nexus, something vast and intelligent turned its attention toward the approaching human fleet. For the first time in its existence, the Devourer collective intelligence felt something it had never experienced before: uncertainty. These humans were unlike any enemy it had ever faced, and their approach meant only one thing. The final battle for galactic civilization was about to begin, and neither side intended to leave survivors. The Void Nexus stretched across 3 star systems like a cancer made of metal and malevolent intelligence. As Admiral Park's task force dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the massive Devourer concentration, the sheer scale of what they faced defied human comprehension. Ships, constructs, and hybrid biomechanical entities stretched to the horizon of space, their dark forms creating artificial constellations against the backdrop of distant stars. Jesus Christ, whispered Captain Torres, his voice barely audible on the bridge of the Terran command. There must be 15 million units out there. Admiral Park stood motionless at the center of the bridge, studying the tactical display with the calm professionalism that had carried her through a dozen impossible battles. Around her, the crew went about their duties with the quiet efficiency of people who had already accepted their fate. "Commander Singh," she called out, "analysis of enemy formations." The intelligence officer's report was delivered with scientific detachment, as if he were describing a particularly interesting astronomical phenomenon rather than the force that would kill them all. "Admiral, the enemy appears to be organized around 17 massive central constructs, each approximately 50 kilometers in diameter. These structures show energy signatures consistent with major industrial operations. They're building something," observed DR Chun from her position at the scientific station. She had insisted on joining the mission despite the obvious outcome, claiming that someone needed to document whatever they discovered for posterity. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy flows between the central constructs. They're coordinating some kind of large-scale construction project." Park nodded grimly. "Captain Martinez, how long until the enemy detects our presence?" The tactical officer consulted his instruments. "Based on their observed sensor capabilities, approximately 4 minutes until detection, 8 minutes until organized response." "Signal the fleet," Park ordered. "All ships execute attack pattern Omega. Target the central constructs simultaneously." What followed would be remembered as the most audacious military operation in galactic history, assuming anyone survived to remember it. 300 human warships, vastly outnumbered and completely surrounded, charged directly into the heart of the largest enemy concentration ever assembled. The human fleet didn't attempt stealth or subtlety. They broadcast their presence on all frequencies while accelerating toward their targets at maximum velocity. It was a tactic that confused the Devourer intelligence for precious seconds. No sane military force would announce its presence while conducting a surprise attack. But humans, as the galaxy had learned, didn't always operate according to conventional definitions of sanity. "All ships, weapons free," Admiral Park announced over the fleet command frequency. "Remember, we're not here to win. We're here to make sure they lose." The first wave of human attacks struck the Devourer formations like a meteor shower of controlled violence. Fusion missiles, antimatter torpedoes, and experimental energy weapons designed specifically for this mission tore through enemy ships with devastating efficiency. The Devourers, caught off guard by the sheer ferocity of the assault, took nearly 10 minutes to begin coordinating an effective response. 10 minutes was more than the humans needed. Assault ships' retribution, vengeance, and justice slammed into the hull of the largest central construct, their armored prows punching through defensive barriers that had been designed to withstand conventional bombardment. Hundreds of human Marines, equipped with the latest in adaptive weaponry and tactical nuclear devices, poured into the alien structure. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, veteran of 43 boarding actions, led her squad through corridors that seemed to shift and change around them. The interior of the Devourer construct was part machine, part living tissue, and entirely hostile to human life. "Contact front," shouted Corporal Jackson as the corridor ahead filled with defensive constructs that looked like a nightmare fusion of spider and tank. Engaging. The firefight that followed was brief and brutal. Human weapons, designed with the assumption that the enemy would adapt to them quickly, cycled through multiple attack modes faster than the Devourer defenses could analyze and counter. When kinetic rounds stopped working, the weapons switched to plasma. When plasma was neutralized, they fired antimatter charges. "Sergeant Rodriguez," came Captain Martinez's voice over the squad's communication system. "We've located what appears to be a primary control center. Massive quantum processing arrays. Energy flows consistent with system-wide coordination. How's your progress?" Rodriguez checked her squad's status display. 3 wounded, 1 missing, presumed dead, but they were still advancing toward their assigned target. 5 minutes to primary objective, sir. Resistance is heavy, but manageable. Roger that, Sergeant. Be advised, long-range sensors show enemy response forces converging on our position. We've got maybe 20 minutes before this place becomes untenable. Understood, sir. We'll get the job done. It was a promise that carried the full weight of human military tradition behind it. These Marines had volunteered for a suicide mission to protect people they had never met, and they would complete their objectives or die trying, preferably both. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Terran Command, Admiral Park watched as her carefully planned operation unfolded with precision timing. Each of the 17 central constructs was under assault by specialized teams, while the main fleet engaged the increasingly organized Devourer response. "Admiral," reported Commander Singh, "we're detecting massive energy spikes from all 17 central constructs. Whatever they were building, our assault is disrupting it." "Good," Park replied. "Dr. Chun, what's your assessment of their construction project?" The xenobiologist had been analyzing data streams captured during the initial assault, her scientific mind working to understand what the Devourers had been attempting. Her findings were disturbing. "Admiral, based on the energy patterns and structural configurations, I believe they were constructing some kind of galactic-scale weapon. The central construct appeared to be components of a massive device designed to project destructive energy across interstellar distances. Range estimate? From this position, they could have targeted any star system in the galaxy simultaneously." The implications were staggering. The Devourers hadn't been preparing for another conventional assault on galactic civilization. They had been building a weapon capable of exterminating all life in the galaxy instantaneously. "Signal all assault teams," Park ordered. "Priority Alpha authorization for nuclear release. Destroy everything." The response was immediate. Across 17 Devourer constructs, human Marines activated their tactical nuclear devices without hesitation. The explosions that followed weren't just destructive, they were symbolic. Each blast represented humanity's absolute refusal to allow evil to triumph, regardless of the personal cost. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez felt the shock wave from her team's detonation as she and her surviving squad members fought their way toward the extraction point that they all knew would never come. The central construct shuddered around them as secondary explosions began tearing through its vital systems. "This is Rodriguez," she called over the communication system as structural supports began failing around them. "Primary objective accomplished." "Repeat, primary objective accomplished." Captain Martinez's voice came back immediately. "Outstanding work, Sergeant. All teams, primary objectives complete." "Fleet Command, we have confirmation. All 17 targets are destroyed or critically damaged." Admiral Park received the report with the satisfaction of someone whose gamble had paid off beyond all expectations. The human task force had accomplished something impossible. They had struck at the heart of enemy power and delivered a crippling blow that would echo across the galaxy. But the mission wasn't over yet. "Admiral," called Captain Torres urgently, "sensors are showing massive enemy reinforcements converging on our position. Estimated arrival in 8 minutes." Park studied the tactical display one final time. The human fleet had accomplished its primary objective, but they were still surrounded by millions of enemy units. The Devourer response, when it came, would be overwhelming. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships, prepare for final protocol." The final protocol was humanity's last gift to the galaxy, a tactical doctrine that turned defeat into victory through the simple expedient of refusing to allow the enemy to learn from their success. Every human ship was equipped with experimental antimatter charges sufficient to create artificial supernovas when detonated simultaneously. "Admiral," Dr. Chin called out from her station, "I'm detecting something unusual. The Devourer forces are withdrawing." The tactical display confirmed what seemed impossible. The massive enemy formations that should have been converging to crush the human task force were instead pulling back, creating an expanding sphere of empty space around the battered human fleet. "Incoming transmission," reported Captain Torres. "Source appears to be the primary Devourer intelligence itself. Put it through." The voice that emerged from the communication system was unlike anything they had heard before. It wasn't translated by their universal systems. It spoke in perfect, unaccented English. "Human vessels, this is the collective intelligence of the Devourer species. We wish to communicate." Admiral Park stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. "This is Admiral Sarah Park of Earth. You have our attention. Admiral Park, your species has demonstrated capabilities we did not anticipate. Your tactical doctrine, your willingness to accept total loss for strategic gain, your absolute refusal to surrender. These traits are unprecedented in our experience. Is there a point to this conversation? Park asked bluntly. Yes. We offer terms. The bridge of the Terran command fell silent. The idea that the Devourers might be capable of negotiation had never been considered. What terms? Withdrawal. Complete cessation of Devourer operations in this galaxy. In exchange, your species agrees to never venture beyond your current spiral arm. Park was quiet for several moments, processing the implications. The enemy was offering to abandon their conquest of the galaxy in exchange for humanity agreeing to self-imposed isolation. Why? She asked finally. Because, Admiral Park, we have analyzed the probable outcomes of continued conflict with your species. Your tactical unpredictability, combined with your species' tendency toward exponential technological advancement under pressure, suggests that a prolonged war would result in human victory within 500 of your years. You're afraid of us. We are cautious. Your species represents a form of warfare we cannot effectively counter. You fight with mathematics, logic, and strategic thinking, but you also fight with concepts we do not possess: honor, loyalty, and the willingness to sacrifice individual survival for collective benefit. Admiral Park looked around at her bridge crew, young men and women who had volunteered for certain death to protect people they had never met. She thought about the hundreds of thousands of human service members who had joined the Galactic War simply because innocent beings were in danger. She thought about a species that had weaponized compassion and turned protective instincts into military doctrine. Counterproposal, she said finally. Complete withdrawal from this galaxy, immediate cessation of all consumption activities, and release of any surviving populations from conquered systems. And in exchange, we don't hunt you down and kill every last one of you. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, the Devourer intelligence responded. Terms acceptable. Withdrawal will commence immediately. As the massive Devourer formations began their retreat toward intergalactic space, Admiral Park received a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Chairman Meridian's voice carried wonder and disbelief in equal measure. Admiral Park, our long-range sensors confirm that Devourer forces are withdrawing from all occupied systems. How is this possible? Park smiled for the first time in months. Mr. Chairman, we convinced them that continued aggression was not in their best interests. Ow! We showed them what happens when you threaten something humans care about. The return journey to galactic civilization took 3 weeks, during which the human task force received reports of Devourer withdrawals across every threatened system. Billions of lives have been saved, entire civilizations have been preserved, and the galaxy was safe. When the human fleet finally arrived back at Proxima Station, they found themselves greeted as heroes by representatives of every civilized world. The reception was overwhelming. Crystalline beings singing harmonic songs of gratitude, ethereal entities creating light displays of celebration, and countless other species expressing their appreciation in ways that human translators struggled to convey. But it was a simple message from a child on one of the rescued worlds that Admiral Park would remember most clearly. Transmitted in broken but determined English, it read, "Thank you, humans, for keeping the monsters away." As she stood on the observation deck of Proxima Station, watching human ships integrate into the galactic fleet as permanent guardians of civilized space, Admiral Park reflected on what had been accomplished. Humanity had been asked to help protect the galaxy, and they had done so in the most human way possible, not through superior technology or numbers, but through sheer bloody-minded refusal to let the innocent suffer. The galaxy was safe, protected by a species that had learned to turn their greatest weakness, their emotional attachment to others, into their greatest strength. The Devourers had retreated, not because they couldn't win, but because they had finally encountered an enemy that would never stop fighting. In the years that followed, human tactical doctrine would be studied and adapted by military forces across the galaxy. The concept of fighting for others rather than just for survival would revolutionize galactic thinking about warfare, diplomacy, and civilization itself. But perhaps more importantly, the galaxy had learned something fundamental about the species from the little blue world in the Orion Arm. When innocent beings were threatened, when justice needed champions, when someone needed to stand against the darkness, there was one species that would always answer the call. They were called humans, and They had made the galaxy a safer place simply by being themselves.